I'm Dr. Shefali Mishra, Associate Professor, Department of Psychology, Jesus and Mary College, University of Delhi. In this special section, we also have Ms. Manisha Sharma, sign language interpreter with us today, who will explain the lecture using symbolic expressions. In this lecture, we will study about critical social realism. We have already done part of it in the previous section, and we will examine some more aspects of critical social science research. So this approach, which is known as critical realism, can be traced to Karl Marx and Freud, and further had been elaborated by Adorno, Fromm, etc. CSS is associated with conflict theory, feminist analysis, and radical psychotherapy also falls under this category. It has disagreement with both PSS and ISS that we have already seen. It has attacked positivism for its objectivity and de-human approaches, and it has also attacked interpretivism for being too subjective and relativist. So CSS believes that social world can be known, described, and explained through human discourse. Further, it believes that knowledge has two functions to serve. The first one is descriptive function, which would mean that describing a phenomenon, explaining a phenomenon. But the second function, according to CSS, which is very important, is performative function, because CSS researchers focus on performative role of research, and they highlight the practical functions of knowledge. So knowledge is useless if it does not have practical function. They use qualitative techniques, observations, interviews, documentary analysis, etc. And their approach is largely ideographic, which means they focus on case and not ideas, not to generalize from the findings. Whereas interpretivism focuses on people's ideas as more important than actual conditions, as per critical realism, ISS does not help people actively. Therefore, CSS departs from interpretivism and takes the position that social research must be reflexive. That means it should study and criticize itself as well as its subject matter. According to critical social science is a critical process of inquiry that goes beyond surface illusions to uncover the real structures in the material world in order to help people change conditions and build a better world. The purpose of social research, according to critical social science, should not only be to study but to change the world by empowering people. It encourages grassroots actions by asking questions and exposing hypocrisy. Research here is carried out to critique and transform social relations by uncovering the underlying sources of these relations and empowering individuals, particularly those who are less powerful. Reduction of illusion by exposing hypocrisy, as we have seen, and identifying the hidden truth is one of the primary goals of CSS researchers. Let us take an example to understand it. If a CSS researcher conducts a study showing racial discrimination in renting of property, the work would not stop here. After finding racial discrimination in renting, a CSS researcher would publish the report, involve media, and meet organizations and government to act and to provide social justice. The ontology for social research in CSS is that of realist orientation about the nature of reality. They believe that reality has several levels, and what is observed on surface may not be actually what the truth is, and it does not reveal deeper levels. So social change or conflict is not easily available or observable. We need to dig deeper and identify it. Reality is influenced by multiple structures like social, political, cultural, economic, ethnic, and gender constructs. These structures, along with other institutional and cultural influences, interact dynamically to create the fabric of social existence, and all of them deserve attention in research. Social structures are complex systems that can influence an individual's thinking and behavior, often unconsciously. So, We can take another example to understand the difference more clearly, whereas ISS researcher may study the interaction of a male boss and female secretary and provide a rich account of their lives by delving into their experiences, by exploring and obtaining narratives about their lived experiences. A CSS researcher will approach this problem differently. The CSS researcher will begin with a feminist point of view here and will note issues which are ignored in an interpretive account. Issues like why secretaries are always female, why is there unequal power distribution, etc. The epistemology for CSS researcher is that they assert that knowledge is shaped by a certain perspective which is influenced by the many power systems present in society. According to CSS, the basic nature of human beings is that they are rationally acting beings. They create society and vice versa. They are decision makers, but of course they are misled at times and can have unrealized potential. Regarding human agency, they perceive human beings as bounded entity, which means actions are based on subjective choices, free will and reasons, but are not unlimited. Because cultural or material limits would bind them. So we can see that they examine and they blend determinism with voluntarism in critical social science research. Common sense again is for them is based on the idea of false consciousness. It is based on the ideas about empirical conditions. So they believe that we should value subjectivity and common sense as these shape human behavior, but also know at the same time that these may be filled with myths. CSS therefore accurately describes conditions generated by underlying structures. It helps people understand their own experiences and historical roles and improve conditions. It eliminates division between researcher and the research, science and daily life. Explanations valued if they have people understand the world and change it. So no explanation will be valuable if that does not have the capability of helping people understand themselves and bringing about some transformation around them. CSS researchers use subjective knowledge to influence the objective world. They believe in reflexive dialectic orientation, which means subjective and objectivity both should be blended. They take combined insights from both their subjective and objective approaches to reality. They adopt a transformative perspective, as we have already seen, towards application of knowledge. Generally, CSS is used by community action group, political organizations, and social movements. So we have seen that the present section was an attempt to develop an understanding about the philosophy of science underlying various research approaches or paradigms in social science research. Here, we learned that there are competing approaches to social research based on the philosophical assumptions about the purpose of science and the nature of social reality. Two of the major approaches were examined in the previous session, and we examined critical realism in the present session. We were able to identify the various research paradigms that exist in social sciences along with their philosophical foundations. In the next session, we will be discussing about methodological approaches to social research, for majorly focusing on the quantitative and qualitative orientations towards research. So when we talk about methodological approaches to social research, let us just begin by again understanding what is research. Research is not simply the gathering of information, but rather is a systematic approach or strategy for developing research questions, conceptualizing and carrying out the inquiry, and selecting the suitable methods for collecting, analyzing, and interpreting data obtained. The methodological approaches to research are based again on the philosophical approaches to social sciences research that deals with question of what is knowledge, how it is acquired, along with causes and techniques of data collection. The present section on methodological orientation to research would help you understand the complexities of quantitative and qualitative research traditions within psychology and select the most appropriate one for your research inquiry. After this lecture, you will have a clearer understanding of the similarities and differences in characteristics, objectives, methodologies, sampling techniques, and ethical considerations between quantitative and qualitative research traditions. So let us now begin by examining what methodological approaches to research is all about. So we know that it determines the methods of data collection, it determines the method of data analysis, and it also influences the quality of research. The term methodology, whether it is used in quantitative form or qualitative research approach, it is rooted in a specific philosophical perspective on epistemology. So quantitative methodology is generally based on positivism and qualitative methodology is based on constructivism. Let us now inspect some of the dimensions of quantitative research. Let us begin by the definition of quantitative research. It is a structured, objective, rigorous, deductive approach that uses systematic procedures to generate and refine knowledge for problem-solving purposes. Here, the concept of reality is represented in terms of variables which are measured and examined using statistical techniques to analyze the correlation between them. The quantitative research approach is expected to ensure the accuracy of their measurements and the ability to replicate their findings. It elucidates phenomena by gathering precise numerical data that remain more or less constant. The data is then evaluated using mathematical techniques, namely statistics, to address questions about the who, what, when, how much, how many, and so on. Quantitative research is characterized as a top-down approach where particular hypothesis is derived from a theory and then examined through data analysis. It is based on the epistemological tradition of determinism, which posits that events are caused by one or more factors and argues that behavior is capable of being explained and measured. Hence, quantitative researchers attempt to establish cause and effect relationship to make probabilistic predictions and generalizations. To support the ontological claim of objectivity to which the quantitative researchers adhere, these researchers seek to maintain a neutral standpoint and observe the phenomena of interest from an objective perspective. This would involve the manipulation of numerical data, the use of logical reasoning, and the adoption of an unbiased objective perspective. So, original research is conducted by a researcher who determines the topic of study, formulates specific and focused questions, gathers measurable data from participants, analyzes the data using statistical method, and carries out the investigation in an important and objective manner. And this would be the example of a proper research in quantitative tradition. It encompasses interpersonal interactions, personal values, meanings, beliefs, thoughts, and emotions involving human beings. It manipulates variables and regulates natural events. Quantitative methodology uses positivism and empiricism for conducting research. We already have studied about it. Experimentation and survey using structured questionnaires are used as methods for data collection. The researcher can categorize or rank the collected data or even measure it using other units of measurement. Quantitative research facilitates the construction of graphs and tables of raw data, simplifying the analysis of results. Researchers employing quantitative methodologies often hold the belief that both natural and social sciences aim to elucidate phenomena via the use of verifiable theories generated from testable assumptions. It endeavors to simplify social reality by treating it as a set of variables, similar to how physical reality would be approached. So the attempt here is to exert precise control over the variables to see their impacts on others. So the focus is on conducting experiments, establishing control groups, employing blind or double-blind investigations, and utilizing measures or instruments. If we want to have an overview of quantitative research, we see that the purpose of research here is to explain, predict, or control phenomena by collecting and analyzing numerical data. The approach is that of deductive approach, which aims to be value-free, objective, and outcome-oriented. The hypothesis is drawn from the theory, which is specific, testable, and stated before conducting the study. It conducts review of literature, which is like a comprehensive analysis that can have a significant impact on the study. Settings are controlled to the maximum extent possible. Sampling involves selecting a large random or randomized sample that is manageable in order to facilitate the generalization of findings to larger populations. Measurements are mostly standardized and numerical, as we have already noticed, which specifically focus on the at-the-end aspect. The design and method in quantitative research is highly structured and well specified, and data collection includes instruments like surveys, experiments, and semi-structured formal questionnaires. Regarding data interpretation, we note that it is formulated at the end of the study and is expressed as a measure of certainty. So, one can say that a quantitative researcher typically starts with number 1, a focused research question or hypothesis. Number 2, collects a small amount of data from each of a large number of individuals. Number 3, describe the resulting data using statistical technique. And number 4, draws general conclusions about some large population. Let us now understand quantitative approach using an example of a specific quantitative study. We take study done by Lepere et al. In 1991, where the nature of stressors and their impact on poor migrants population was studied. This required identification and measurement of common sources of stress, such as daily hassles and chronic strains, using standard quantitative methods and structured questionnaires. The link between chronic stress and health, along with coping strategies, were then examined. All these constructs were defined, operationalized, and measured using suitable questionnaires. Scales were used on 150 selected individuals from a randomly from a population of a total of 480 participants. There were hypotheses which were formulated, and the hypothesis number 1 was that chronic stress would be associated with negative health outcomes, and the second hypothesis was that daily hassles would have no or low association with negative health outcomes. The quantitative data was obtained, and the data obtained was statistically analyzed, and correlation among variables like stress and health were obtained. Findings suggested that chronic stress related with poor health and lower social support. So we see that results obtained confirm the hypothesis. Even though the study did not involve manipulation of variables as done in case of experimentation, it is considered to be a quantitative research because it made use of structured questionnaire, and it shows how quantitative or positivist methodology can be used in the discipline of psychology. So hope this would have made this particular concept of quantitative research clear to you. So this research further is an example of hypothetical deductive method to test a proposition called hypothesis, which is a tentative presumption about how two variables are related, and this hypothesis was based on theory of stress. So again, if we see basic assumptions of quantitative approach, we see that number 1, a quantitative approach assumes that a construct can be measured and quantified. So for example, concepts like stress, like well-being, self-conception, all can be operationalized and measured using standardized tests, scales, or other quantitative techniques. Which also means that psychological characteristics like personality and intelligence are normally distributed and can be quantified. Thus, numerical data is produced to represent reality. Assumption of random assignment of the participant in the intervention or control and random sampling required to draw inferences from a sample and helps to formulate general laws. Hypothetic deductive analysis is used, which focuses on confirmation and reconfirmation of theories and cause-effect relationship. Like we saw that, the hypothesis was drawn from the theory of stress, and it was seen whether, daily hassles versus chronic stress have any implication for the health of the individual. Researcher may not be directly in contact with the participants. So, there are various advantages of quantitative methods. The quantitative research, first of all, has led the scientific research in social sciences based on experimentation used in natural sciences. So we cannot overlook this important contribution of quantitative research in psychology. It focuses on developing theories, thereby enhancing the theoretical understanding of many social processes. The quantitative data collected is considered to be hard data. It is numerical and ordered, which is analyzed statistically. Statistical analysis helps in getting clarity of meaning of many constructs and making generalizations. However, it also suffers from some of the major limitations which are mentioned here. Since quantitative data is statistically analyzed and is based on the fulfillment of certain statistical assumptions, we will find some problems in applying this to the research, because statistical assumptions, some of the statistical assumptions are: number one, randomization of sample; number two, normality of data distribution; and number three, independence of the research observation or scores; and number four, errors of measurement, free measurement, and also an equal level or homogeneity of variance. So there is a possibility of incorrectly interpreting results if any of these statistical assumptions are not taken into consideration. For example, suppose the assumption of randomization is violated when researcher chooses a sample that is convenient or purposive. So here what will happen, that we are not able to confidently say whether the result can be generalized to a larger population or not. And this incorrect interpretation in research is not accepted as scientific. Similarly, statistical softwares do not indicate the fulfillment of statistical assumptions of the data. Now we turn to qualitative research approaches, which is an important alternative to quantitative research. The term qualitative research method is used to describe non-numerical ways of generating and analyzing data, such as texts and visual material. It also refers to a broader framework that encompasses certain epistemological and ontological assumptions. Qualitative research originated in the disciplines of anthropology and sociology, but is now used to study many psychological topics as well. Qualitative research is based on interpretivism and constructivism, the two philosophical approaches about which we studied in the previous session. These four types of research generally begins with a less focused research question. It collects large amount of relatively what we call unfiltered data from a relatively small number of individuals and describes their data using non-statistical techniques. These researchers are usually less concerned with drawing general conclusions about human behavior, and they are more concerned with understanding the experiences of the participants in detail. Qualitative methods have become increasingly popular in the field of psychology in recent years. The prevailing view is that the development of qualitative psychology mostly started in the 1980s, if we take the earliest point. Qualitative approaches performed inadequately in the initial stages of psychology, and only the area of marketing psychology had embraced qualitative methodologies earlier, and gradually it gained prominence in other domains. The 1980s saw the beginning of a period of expansion for social psychology, health psychology, psychotherapy, and counseling psychology, among other fields, and it was during this period that there was a significant development of theoretically grounded and philosophical approaches to qualitative psychology, because they were found to be practical and applicable, especially in these domains. Undoubtedly, mainstream psychology has mostly been a quantitative field throughout its history and is expected to continue in this manner for the foreseeable future. Mainstream psychology extensively supports the use of the term quantitative in almost every aspect. Numbers and countings have played a crucial role in the field of psychology throughout history, and we all have witnessed this. Nevertheless, occasional utilization of qualitative methodologies has had a notable influence on the field of psychology. Qualitative approaches have been used in psychology since the late 19th century. Qualitative research encompasses various techniques, each with different levels of dedication to certain fundamental concepts. However, some essential principles that are often upheld include the following. The approaches involve 4 key elements: prioritizing the understanding and analysis of meaning. Number 2, favoring research methods that generate theories through observation and inference. Number 3, acknowledging the influence of specific context on meaning. And finally, number 4, recognizing that researchers' perspective and subjectivities are inherently intertwined with the research process, which is of course considered a bias in quantitative research, but it is seen as one of the strengths of qualitative research. Thank you.